Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So we've got a very interesting topic, which is mostly neglected, metastatic RCC and its subdivisions. So Dr. Rafi is our presenter today. He'll present the case, and if you have any query or any question, you can interrupt and ask freely. We'll be most happy to answer those questions. Yes, Dr. Rafi.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Dr. Rafi, a resident urology. Today, the topic of discussion is metastatic RCC.
आगे आ जाएं आप लोग सारे.
It's a very huge
Ah, yeah.
topic to cover it in 45 minutes. So let's start from some refreshing slides of Pakistan tourism, a beautiful country. So metastatic RCC. So I will cover the risk stratification, oligometastatic disease, cytoreductive nephrectomy, angioembolization, and targeted therapies. So let's some brief discussion about the RCC. RCC is the most common cancer of kidney, accounting for 85% of renal tumors. More than 50% of RCCs are incidentally detected during non-invasive imaging used to evaluate non-specific symptoms. Incidentally detected tumors tend to be smaller and lower stage than those detected in symptomatic patients. Approximately 1/3 of all new diagnosed patients develop synchronous metastatic disease, and 20 to 40% are localized disease develop metastasis in futures. So metastatic RCC is almost always fatal and treatment-resistant malignancy with generally poor outcome and median survival of less than 1 year after diagnosis. So the 10-year survival rate is less than 5%. Patients with metastatic disease account for majority of deaths related to RCC. Surgery and chemotherapy have limited or no role. So these are the risk stratification survival according to the risk stratification. So the good patient with the good risk factors have 20 months of survival. Intermediate risk factors have 10 months, and poor are 4 months. So this already shows we have already discussed that 20% are metastatic on diagnosis, and the localized tumor are 56% on diagnosis, and with a locorenal spread are 19%. This slide shows the incidence mortality of RCC. So if you look to this slide, it's the incidence is in a rising pattern while the mortality has remained same since 1975. These are all due to the investigation that nowadays RCC are incidentally diagnosed. So some newer understanding of RCCs that today's RCC are considered to be a metabolic disease, which include the number of signaling pathway. The commonest genetic abnormalities are renal mutation of von Hippel genes, mutation, von Hippel mutation, upregulation of vascular endothelial growth factor and platelet-derived growth factor, which lead to angiogenesis and proliferation. So role of vascular endothelial growth factor in RCC. Say it binds to the receptors on endothelial cells and promote the migration of endothelial cell migration and proliferation of and development of new tumor-induced blood vessels. So it's lead to angiogenesis. These are the mechanism how to hypoxia and von Hippel mutation develop lead to the angiogenesis. So if we look to the slide, normally when there is no hypoxia, so HIF hypoxia-induced factor is in a restricted state and degraded by proteasome, while on von Hippel mutations, hypoxia-induced factors aggravated, which lead to the platelet-derived factor growth factor and induce the vascular endothelial growth factor, which lead to the angiogenesis. These are the same slides. Immune system. Today's RCC is considered as immunogenic. So cancer express mutated protein recognized by the immune system with anti-tumor responses. T cells have a key role, but immune checkpoint pathway reduce the inappropriate and sustained T cells activation in health system. Metastasis in RCC. Widely metastasis, RCC can be metastasized to hematogenous through renal vein and lymphatic vessel. The most common metastasis site is lung, then liver and bone. So how to certify a patient for according to risk stratification? Why it is important? Important for the patient counseling. You will live less than 1 year or greater than 1 year. Important for planning of therapy. Either we should give TKI or we should go for a cytoreductive nephrectomy. Important for clinical study trial and study design. So prognostic factors for risk stratification are patient factors, performance scores, staging, histopathological factors, including grade, RCC subtypes, sarcomatoid features, microvascular invasion, tumor necrosis, invasion of renal fats, and collecting system. And these are two other criteria as Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center criteria and Hinge IMDC criteria.
Do you have any idea what are the prognostic factors? आप लोग सारे आगे आके बैठ जाएं. Come in front. जी, Dr. Faisal, what do you mean by prognostic factors?
These are the factors which have impact in the survival of the patient. There are two basically main factors, one related to the patient's general condition and other related to the tumor behavior, whether it is a malignant or has sarcomatoid features, which is more malignant and have worse prognosis and poor response to the chemotherapy. And these depend on both
So
these.
why these are made, that we know that how much is the survival of the patient, what will be his life for those 3-4 months respectively, 1 year, and what will happen after that. So for the patient to take decisions, to know that what is going on, we should be informing these things. So now things are changing at a very fast pace, and a lot of apps and calculators are being made for this. So we'll be discussing that.
So these are prognostic factors, performance tests, tumor burdens. Either we have done primary nephrectomy, site of metastasis, or pro-inflammatory markers, treatment-related factors that prior therapy are given or not, prior radiotherapy used or not, disease-free interval, diagnosis of treatment interval. So the first prognostic factor is always tumor staging is prognostic factors, independent prognostic factor that is overall impact on overall survival rate. Stage-based survival, if we look this to this graph, that T stage 1, the survival is more than 80%, and for a 5-year survival rate. If T2 stage, it's greater than 70, but in stage 4, it's about less than 10%. Histopathology, how it's progression. So mostly histopathological nuclear feature have impact on overall survival rate. About this is a new WHO criteria for nuclear size, 10 mm, 15 mm, and 20 mm, greater than 20 mm. These all are histopathological size of a nucleus to grade the RCC for overall survival rate. Tumor type, tumor type is an independent factor for overall survival rate, is that clear cell histology has significantly poor cancer-specific survival. So histological subtype is an independent predictor of outcome of patient with renal cell carcinoma. Tumor grades is also an independent factor with overall survival rate, and commonly we use a Fuhrman grades of grade 1, 2, 3, and 4, and look at the survival rate of grade 1 with 89, good survival overall rate, with grade 4 is only 46%. Tumor necrosis also is considered as an independent factor for outcome of clear cell carcinoma and chromophobe. So it should be routinely done by histopathologist. So it's also the part of integrated staging system of science scores, size, stage, size, grade, and necrosis score. These are the science score or say size, grade, and necrosis scoring. So it's include staging, size of the tumor, tumor grades, and tumor necrosis absent or present. So it's score is from 0 to greater than 10. At 0, it's survival, 10-year survival rate is 93%, while if it's a gradually increasing, so with decreasing survival, overall survival rates. These are the performance score which matter to the overall survival rate. Routinely, we use ECOG status, but there are further Karnofsky scale and Zuber scales. So these all are independent. If a patient has a good performance score, his survival rate will be good. If he is bad, so survival, he will become in a poor risk group, so the survival will be not good. These are the University of California, Los Angeles integrated system. It's stratify the patient in low risk, intermediate, and high risk according to a disease. So if localized or metastatic, in all low risk, intermediate, and high risk affect the survival, and it includes a T-stage infirmary grade and ECOG status again. So if for localized disease, a low risk has a good survival of about 90%, with intermediate for 80 and high risk for 54%, with metastatic disease of for high about near to 0% for survival. Again shows the University of Los Angeles scoring criteria. So with a good survival and a lower stage and bad prognosis and greater stage. This is Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center criteria, which include again the performance scores, LDH, lactate dehydrogenase, hemoglobin level, serum corrected serum creatinine, calcium, time for diagnosis to treatment. So it divides the patient in a favorable, intermediate, and poor risk. Every criteria has one number. So a favorable is a 0, intermediate 1 to 2, and poor is 3 to 5. So Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Hospital has its limitation because it's done about in 1990s. So it has no validation in future. So it's not applied and practices modern targeted therapies. So look at this graph. It's a cytokine area. So with the good performance, normal hemoglobin, high corrected calcium, and low LDH. So the overall survival rate depends and varies with these factors. With the favorable patient with good survival and intermediate with so these are comparison of Sloan Kettering with the Cleveland Foundation's criteria. Cleveland only validated the Sloan Kettering with addition of prior radiotherapy given or not on presence of any metastasis and nodes. IMDC criteria. So International Metastatic RCC Database Consortium is a prognostic tool in a patient with a metastatic RCC previously treated with a first-line targeted therapy. So the Sloan Kettering tells us about the cytokine area, while IMDC criteria is a newer criteria treated with the first-line targeted therapies. And so determine overall survival in a patient treated with targeted therapies, focus on those receiving a modern treatment. This is slide shows the IMDC criteria, which include the time for diagnosis to treatment less than 1 year. Again, performance scores, hemoglobin, calcium, it adds neutrophil and platelets counts also. Every has a one number, and it again divided patient into favorable, intermediate, and poor risk with 1 to 2 and greater than 3. Again, look at this, the survival rate with a favorable, intermediate, and poor risk groups. It's 37, 28 months, and just 9.4 months with a poor risk. Again, the comparison between Sloan Kettering and IMDC is just addition of neutrophilia and thrombocytosis and IMDC. See some molecular biological factor and genetic markers which affect the prognosis in metastatic RCC. These are the tumor-based markers or vascular endothelial growth factors, and blood-based markers are soluble LDH. Immunological markers are interleukins, hepatocytes. So the conclusion of risk stratification are the patient with the localized RCC, TNM staging system provide the primary prognosis information. In addition to prognosis information, incorporating parameters such as performance status and performance histologically, it also affects the prognosis. The introduction of molecular targeted therapy has improved the prognosis of patient with a metastatic RCC. Various prognosis models have been developed or being clinically used to describe the risk. So UA guidelines of 2021 for risk stratification use the current tumor node metastasis is strong evidence. WHO criteria to use clarify the renal carcinoma. WHO criteria, International Society of Urological Pathology criteria based on a grading system. Nuclear feature is a basophilic or eosinophilic nucleus as seen by magnification power. How much? If it's the grade 1, it's rarely seen by, it's mostly seen by 400 magnification, where the grade 4 is 100, just 100 magnification power. So the next is oligometastasis. Look at this slides. It's in old areas, how doctor consider for metastasis. Again, patient in older area with metastasis, patient in modern era with metastasis. Oligometastatic disease or solitary or few detectable metastatic lesions that are usually confined to a single organ or maybe more than one organ. Oligometastasis is usually considered 5 or below than 5. Less than 5 lesions. Early detection or an aggressive treatment patient with small number of metastatic lesions is worth testing as an approach improving long-term survival. So again, this shows the survival of metastasis, oligometastasis. If it's 1 or greater than 1, the survival, it's affect the survival rates. 2, let's see this 5 with a 5 or greater than 5 metastasis. Look at the survival overall survival rate. If it's greater and less metastasis, less metastatic disease. So theories of oligometastasis, there are two theories how it develops. A spectrum theory that Hellman and Welch Bam described an intermediate state of exists between the local and widespread disease, and the other theory is seed and soil theories that tumor cells have a specific affinity for specific organ, the soil, that metastasis would only result if the seeds and soil were compatible. So these are some terminology we can use, and oligometastasis, synchronous, metachronous oligometastasis as oligoprogression and oligopersistence. Synchronous oligometastasis, if below than 5 metastatic lesion or recurrent lesion in the presence of active primary lesions, or metachronous, which develop after the treatment of treatment and then a free interval, a new presentation of oligometastasis. Oligopersistence after treatment, there are micrometastases which left behind or the tumor foci is located in the site not accessed by chemotherapy. So that were an oligopersistent metastatic RCC. Oligorecurrences are recurrence at the primary site after the treatment with local therapy. Oligoprogressive disease are the few resistant clones progress despite of therapy. These are oligoprogressive. So management of option for metastatic RCC, we divide in local therapy and systemic therapies. Local therapies are primary treatment for the primary tumors and metastasis. So the primary tumor, we could deal it with a cytoreductive effective embolization of primary tumor. and with the metastatectomy, radiotherapy, and embolization. So local option.
What is the difference between radical nephrectomy and cytoreductive nephrectomy, Dr. Zafar? We always listen to radical nephrectomy, but we hardly hear about cytoreductive nephrectomy.
Sir, it actually differs in the goal that we're trying to achieve. In radical nephrectomy, we are trying to actually get the patient tumor free. While in a cytoreductive nephrectomy, we though are trying to remove the bulk of the tumor, but we still have metastasis and distant metastasis, which does not eradicate the disease per se. And then again, it's also to reduce the tumor bulk.
Yeah, and maybe because he has got any hematuria or any symptom which is causing problems, so he is having pain. So anything can be done to reduce that and stop that. So we perform the intention. The intention is different in radical and cytoreductive. I guess we are clear. Everyone is clear about cytoreductive nephrectomy. If there is a metastatic disease and you're performing a nephrectomy for whatever the cause, hematuria or pain or any reason, maybe you have to give TKIs, later targeted therapies. So that is a cytoreductive nephrectomy. Okay.
So local therapy or local options for METs, it's a single beam radiation therapy, RFA, surgery, brachytherapy, intraarterial embolization coming with immunotherapy, combining with immunotherapy. Local therapy for metastasis, we can use on the basis of performance scoring. We can excise the mets and pulmonary, liver, and pancreas. And for bone, it's mostly a radiotherapy. Embolization or for hypervascular bone at spinal metastasis, we can use embolization and palliation and PAN. So favorable factors are metastasis. Okay. In which patient we can do a excision of meds. It's solitary, if it's a solitary, age less than 60 years, disease-free interval for more than 1 year, and pulmonary meds less than 4 centimeter or metacoronous lesion. We can do a metastatectomy. So these are the UA guidelines of 2021 for the local therapies.
Dr. Nazish, I've got a question for you. Can you hear us?
Yes, sir.
There is a kidney confined tumor of 8 centimeter with a lesion in the liver, which is 3 centimeter. So how will you proceed in this case?
Sir, starting to know about the MSK criteria about the patient. If it falls in the favorable intermediate risk or in a good favorable risk, I would perform the cytoreductive nephrectomy with the metastectomy if the lesion is resectable.
And which thing you will operate first, or you will simultaneously operate? How will you proceed?
Sir, if it can be performed simultaneously with the help of our general surgery team, I would like to perform at the simultaneously type, the simultaneous.
Whenever you listen to a question like this, we always get excited that yes, we can perform a metastectomy in this patient, but you have to always see the other things as well. You have to risk stratify, as Dr. Nazish said, and then you have to assess that are there any other metastases, visible metastases somewhere else? Because the most common sites, as Dr. Rafi has shown, is lungs and liver and bones. So you have to assess that everything is clear or not. What are the patient's symptoms, rather than getting excited, okay, we'll remove these two and we leave and don't see the other things as well. So step by step, you can do that. And even it has got role of targeted therapies in a case like that. So these are real-time scenarios which you will be seeing in your clinic. And the bookish thing is separate and the scenarios are separate. So you need to understand how to fit these scenarios in the real life and then proceed for them.
Now coming to a cytoreductive nephrectomy. In today's world, the role of cytoreductive nephrectomy is somewhat controversial. Several studies have been done, and some studies favor the cytoreductive nephrectomies, while others is against cytoreductive nephrectomy. We do cytoreductive nephrectomy and with the intent of curative. If the tumor resection is curative only if all tumor are resected, primary tumor with a single or oligometastatic resectable disease, and then with the palliative intent of for most patient to control severe or local symptomatic symptoms and require systemic therapy. So the clinical evidence of which benefit the cytoreductive nephrectomy immunotherapy area with the cytokine area. These SWOG or EORTC trial favor the cytoreductive nephrectomy, but these are the cytokine area studies. So the new in target therapies, they are Carmina or SOTRAM trial, which make it in some controversial that in a favorable risk, it's cytoreductive nephrectomy increase the overall survival, while in poor risk it doesn't affect any survival. So until further phase 3 trial level evidence become available, cytoreductive nephrectomy is currently regarded as a standard for care for patient with a low metastatic burden and a good performance scale. So this is recently this study is proven by some study from Canada and Ireland. These are cytokine areas, how it's improved the survival rate of cytoreductive nephrectomy before in. And it's in targeted areas, target therapy areas of how cytoreductive nephrectomy affect the survival rate. It's improved the survival rate only for a low risk, a low burden tumor with a favorable risk groups, but there is no any with line one in red, there is no any effect on poor risk groups. So what will be the rationale of the cytoreductive nephrectomy? Its rationale is to eliminate the primary source. Removal of large primary tumors may clinically benefit the patient, and spontaneously some metastatic lesions spontaneously regress, or as we have already discussed that the renal cell carcinoma is now considered immunogenic. So the inhibition of T cell function is important, prevent the potential bleeding and pain during systemic therapy, and we achieve accurate histologic subtyping and palliation for symptoms. So indications for cytoreductive nephrectomy are with a good performance score, a resectable primary tumor, and we can done it as a palliative and intractable pain, severe hematuria, constituent symptoms, paraneoplastic manifestation with the pressure symptoms on surrounding viscera. So the proper patient selection is very important. It has been observed that 31% of patients never receive systemic therapy following cytoreductive nephrectomy. So, and these patients, cytoreductive nephrectomy are not recommended with a poor performance score, poor IMDC risk criteria, small primary, high metastatic volume, sarcomatite features, and are confirmed by Carmina trial. So the disadvantages of cytoreductive nephrectomy is delayed the start of systemic therapies, targeted systemic therapy, and a perioperative complication coupled with the disease progression. Already, Southwest Oncology Group and European Oncology Research Treatment for Cancer trial have proven the role of cytoreductive nephrectomy, but they were in cytokine area. So the newly established Carmina trial was initiated to prove the role, but it's not and somewhat favoring to the cytoreductive nephrectomy. And sometime the final results are awaited, but it is in favoring of cytoreductive nephrectomies. So a SWOG trial done in cytokine area with the improve overall survival rate. Again, do the two criteria or trials done in cytokine areas, EORTC and SWOG trial, which on the basis of there is approval of overall survival rate with cytoreductive nephrectomies. This is a Carmina trial we recently done in 2021. The last results is come with its nephrectomy with sunitinib of 50 milligram per day or target therapy sunitinib only. So the conclusion is of this study is sunitinib alone is non-inferior to an nephrectomy followed by sunitinib. So, and all we have already discussed in a favorable risk groups, if the tumor burden is less and performance score is good, so it favor the cytoreductive nephrectomy, while in poor risk group IMDC criteria, IMDC or Sloan-Kettering criteria, it has no role in overall survival to improve the overall survival rate. Again, Carmina trial tell us that delayed nephrectomy and sunitinib only treated patients improve the survival. So delayed nephrectomy and a good responder is associated with improved overall survival and should be considered in selected patient. Look at the sunitinib and then delayed nephrectomy. It's a big improvement in overall survival rate with 15.7 to 48%. So the for Carmina trial, the investigator concluded that sunitinib alone is not inferior to cytoreductive nephrectomy, followed by sunitinib. Median overall survival is longer in sunitinib arm alone. So does that mean we should not do a cytoreductive nephrectomy in appropriately selected patient? So we should do 40, because Carmina trial by self is somewhat controversial because there are in some error biases in selection. Is 40% of patients in the nephrectomy arm of Carmina had a poor risk criteria. It's the other trial is CERTAM trial, which is nephrectomy and sunitinib or sunitinib nephrectomy and sunitinib trial. The overall results are awaited. Cytoreductive nephrectomy is a schematic diagram which shows cytoreductive nephrectomy, which prove our favor towards cytoreductive and against cytoreductive. So SWAG and ERTC trial in the favor of cytoreductive nephrectomy, while SUR and CERTAM and Carmina somewhat in favor for favorable risk and against on poor risk group. So conclusion for cytoreductive nephrectomy, despite of the lack of randomized control trial, there is a sufficient evidence to support the hypothesis that major subgroup of metastatic RCC patient benefit from cytoreductive nephrectomy combination with approved current first-line therapy. So if metastatic RCC presentation with a good performance stated, resectable primary or low tumor burden outside the kidney, upfront cytoreductive nephrectomy is preferred. These are the EUA guidelines of 2021. Do not perform cytoreductive nephrectomy in a poor risk groups. So the next is angioembolization in metastatic RCC. So what is angioembolization? It's a deliberate blocking of the blood flow to the kidney by the placement of blocking agents. Many various blocking agent can be is used nowadays: gel foam, polyvinyl alcohol, or metallic coils. Renal artery embolization proven to be safe and effective techniques if at the time interval from embolization to surgery is reduced to less than 48 hours. So indication for angioembolization in metastatic RCC are prior to planned resection to decrease hemorrhage. It's with a palliative intent of with massive hematuria or flank pain if the patient is unfit for surgery or non-resectable disease. EUA guidelines offer embolization to the patient unfit for surgery presenting with a massive hematuria or flank pain. So the next is systemic therapy. And systemic
Dr. Asad, your comments on it, that we have heard that for metastatic disease, we perform angioembolization. We have seen that a lot of times patient comes with hematuria and poor risk, can inoperable. So we angioembolize that too. Have you undergone any case, so you've got a vast experience, that pre-operatively, before a nephrectomy, 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, or week before the surgery, the tumor was angioembolized and then it was operated. Any incidents like that?
Many incidences in the earlier part of the intervention when it was introduced in SIUT, and that was around the when the first decade of this century starts, that is 2000. Because at that time, our radiology was equipped with CT scan, and they were doing interventional radiology. So we had got that opportunity at that time. So what we did, we thought of probably if we block the blood supply to the tumor, then the tumor, which is quite big, probably can be easily taken out. But what happens is in the first 48 to 72 hours, the tumor actually increases in size. Why it increases in size? Because whatever the blood vessel that we are blocking is the main vessel, but there are many collaterals also. And the reaction to the blockage of arterial supply, the main arterial supply, is the tumor starts having a lot of edema. And that edema is actually accumulation of a lot of fluid because the necrosis actually starts. So when this necrotic fluid and other things, they start, the thing starts to swell up. And many of the times we have to open up the case before the planned procedure, just because of the reason that the kidney is below the diaphragm and the diaphragm is not moving and the patient is in respiratory embarrassment. So it was a difficult procedure to do after angioembolization. And that was not only an assumption and an impression, it was something which was right there before our eyes. So that practice was actually abandoned. And that was abandoned by all of us who were in the business of doing renal tumors. And now nobody is doing it.
Yeah.
You won't see a single case in the city, in the country, in your unit, having been done after angioembolization. So it is only for palliation. And for the first 24, 48 hours, maybe 72 hours, you always think that the patient will come to you in an emergency with a lot of things. For instance, pain, increase in pain rather than decrease in pain, increase in embarrassment of respiration, and plus fever. So these are the things which you might expect when you do angioembolization. So please, whenever you prescribe angioembolization, you must think of having your patient in the first 2-3 days, and you should not ask the patient to go to another, say, city or to his or her village, because then the patient will not be able to come to you. So patient should be around. It might not be possible for him or her to be in the hospital, but the patient should be around the hospital, close to the hospital. These things do happen. So
Because we have heard about that previously. We haven't seen these cases, but I guess it was a good practice to stop that. And if the patient needs surgery, you can go up front and perform a surgery.
So come to systemic therapy. It's include immunotherapy, target therapies, and chemotherapies. So immunotherapy, we can use interferon alpha, interleukin 2, and immune checkpoint inhibitors. Role of immunotherapy is somewhat spontaneous remission have been documented. Increased risk of cancer and immunodeficient states. It's disadvantages. These are the how it's act with the cancer cancer cells present as an antigen presenting cells, which activate the T cells that can kill the cancer cells. Interferon alpha was commonly the agent of choice in the initial treatment of metastatic RCC until the advent of ovascular growth factor pathway antagonist. Response rate was 6 to 15%, and decrease in the progression risk is 25%. It's effective only in some patients subgroups as clear cell carcinoma and lung mets only. So with the addition of bevacizumab, it's increased the response rate and progression-free survival. So these how we can give interferon alpha with 5 million unit 3 days a week for 4 weeks, wait for 4 weeks, then we re-image, re-stratify the patient. If with the response, continue with treatment. If progression is somewhat switch to alternate systemic treatments. So with side effects or adverse effects of interferon in acute, it is cause a flu-like syndrome, hypertension, and other abnormalities. With a chronic neuropathy, depression, hematological abnormalities, dermatological. So interleukin 2 was used in cytokine area for treatment of metastatic RCC. Patient with a clear cell appear most likely to benefit from interleukin therapy. Complete regression of all metastatic tumors, 7 to 9% are noted. And if greater than 80% of complete responder, disease-free survival for long-term follow-up, if the patient is greater than 80% with respond to the interleukin, so its survival rate and long-term free survival is in follow-up. Unacceptable high treatment-related mortality is unacceptable due to high mortality rate, is 2 to 5%. So the current role is we use only high dose interleukin 2 regime being considered for cytokine therapy with a good performance status, limited disease, time from nephrectomy to systemic therapies greater than 1 year, and or expression of carbonic anhydrase. So the doses are same. The treatment schedule are same to the interferon with 7.2 million, 5 days in a week for 4 weeks, then re-imaging response, check the response. If responder, then continue, or if non-responder, then switch to other therapies.
Now this a word about interleukin because okay.
So interleukin complications are hypertension, capillary leak syndrome, respiratory distress syndrome, neurological depression, hepatic and renal abnormalities, cardiac. Due to high mortality rate, so it's rarely used nowadays. A death with interleukin 2 as 4%, but death with interferon is only 0.74%. So that's why interferon is preferred over interleukin.
And all over the world, interleukin and interferon and the combination of both of them, they have been abandoned totally.
Yes.
Just because of the reason of this capillary leak syndrome, and the other one is they cannot be prescribed for the patients at home. The patient has to be in the ICU, and this capillary leak syndrome is so devastating. I have seen only one case, but that case was enough for me for my whole life, because every orifice in the body has got something coming out of it, and that is blood. So there is nothing that one can do if this process sets in. So it was not something of benefit as such now, because of the availability of different kind of drugs and because of the understanding of immunological aspects of tumor occurrence, particularly RCC. So since the theory is changed and the theory is now understood, so we can very well do with checkpoint inhibitors.
So the combination of interleukin and interferon have high response rate of 18.6% with a high progression-free survival of 20%, but they are abundant due to the high toxicity and no significant difference in survival.
But side effects are there. ये हमारे जो वो है कैंपेन में है, इससे जो है वो
जी
इसका जिक्र है कि 2 reported randomized control trial है जिसमें cytoreductive nephrectomy plus cytokine therapy have got benefit, survival benefit, as compared to cytokine only, as compared to cytoreductive only.
Yes.
So the newer group is checkpoint inhibitors. It's block the synthesis of certain protein.
I guess we'll conclude here, and then we can adjust your talk in some other time because I guess it's difficult to perform those slides. Briefly summarize करना आपने क्या क्या अभी तक बताया है?
Up to now, we have discussed the arrest stratification, oligometastatic disease, and cytoreductive nephrectomy. Wait.
So I guess I'll briefly summarize it. We have
And
done, we
embolization.
have
So the
discussed-
targeted therapies are due to short of time. So it's left for another session.
because the main frame of metastatic disease are targeted therapies and things are changing at a very fast pace on it. So we have covered a lot of things and we'll be covering targeted therapies in our next session. So if anybody has got any query, any questions, because metastatic disease is a very complicated and difficult topic to discuss. So if you got any query, you can feel free to
Can I
ask.
ask what was the consensus about cytoreductive nephrectomy?
Sir, जी.
Cytoreductive nephrectomy role is somewhat controversial. It's proven effective in cytokine area, but the new trials, the Carmina and Certram trials, it's favor cytoreductive nephrectomy in favorable risk patients, while it's against in poor risk patients.
What about palliative cytoreductive?
Palliative
Is
cytorectomy
there a place for palliative cytoreductive?
Yes, sir. Cytoreductive is mostly being done for palliation nowadays. So they were, Dr. Saab has shown us 2 trials which were in favor of cytoreductive nephrectomy and 2 trials which were favor in upfront targeted therapies. So
इसमें मेरी सजेशन ये है कि इसमें तो resection of the metastasis के
Yes.
ऊपर भी रखें next time
जी sir.
ताकि उसका क्या benefits हैं. Resection of metastasis जैसे solitary lung है, solitary
या liver lesion है वो हमने डिस्कस किया था.
तो उसमें डिस्कस किया था.
जी जी सर. ठीक है सर. Thank you, Dr. Rafi. Thank you everyone.